Hello, my name is Kawthar. Welcome to 100 Stories Deep. Today I'm reading from My Sister's Lips by Naima Roberts. I've chosen this story because it's a very thought-provoking book and you can get it from websites and in stores as well. Alright, so I'm going to read from chapter 5 and the title of this chapter is called Covering our beauty. Yesterday we were walking down the street looking like most other women do, with our hair done to perfection, outfits carefully selected for maximum impact, perfume wafting in our wake, hips swaying, heads turning, queens of the street. Then, in a matter of days, the weeks, Islam came into our lives and changed everything. Now we revisit those same streets, clad from head to toe in our enveloping black and only our eyes showing. Which path brought us here? First steps. In the beginning, covering myself with the head wrapping and loose clothes was a tonic. I wanted to read, to free myself from my reliance on my looks. I wanted to test myself to see whether I had the courage to get by on the strength of my personality, character, and deeds. It was not a decision I took lightly, and though at the time I could not have known that the initial desire to cover up would lead me to, I suppose after having considered my model's orderantly to date and having seen and there was a better, albeit more difficult, an alternative, I would not have been able to carry on as before. How could I have any self-respect if I found myself once again batting my eyelashes or deliberately choosing to wear a pair of trousers because they made me look absolutely ravishing? Indeed, I remember thinking to myself, you've grown to rely on your looks in a way for so long. How much respect do you really have for yourself? I have long thought of the practice of judging women according to their measurements totally unacceptable. Which is why I was dead against beauty contest, but I hadn't. We, in our own way, being a part of such a system? Question mark. Beautiful people the world over have an unfair vantage and an easy ticket to social success. Guest list, nightclub entry, free drinks, concert streams of admirers. Of course, for many young women, just coming to terms with her feminine power to just be very excited, this is very exciting. You feel as if the whole world is at your feet if only you can make friends with the right people and hang out in the right places. But haven't I seen this same girl time and again become complacent, lazy, boring. It was as if now that they knew how far they could go with their looks alone, they didn't feel the need to develop their intellect, their sense of humor, their ambition to have a personality and a mind of their own. Although my case had not been that extreme, I knew that I was ready to take a change. And so on that day after I got back from Egypt, I took a length of cloth and wrapped it around my head. This was by no means the first time I had done this. I had often worn head wraps when I was performing at traditional Zambian performances and with our band, as well as at other times, particularly when I was having a bad hair day. But this time it was different somehow. I was not wearing this piece of cloth to make a cultural statement. I'm black and I'm proud. I was doing it to curb of certain part of me and to carve out a little private place for myself, even if it was only my hair that was covered. So on that day, I took my first tentative steps towards covering, and I admit it was miserable. No one was looking at me. There was no flirtation, nothing. I felt completely invisible. That lasted for about half a day. Then something inside of me just clicked. I thought, good, don't look. Don't compare me with your last or latest squeeze. Don't try and guess my measurements. My body is my own business, and I have had that feeling ever since. And that feeling is one reflected time and again by women who choose to cover themselves and make their bodies their own private space. Journeys of transition. It was only a few months of wearing a head wrap that I considered wearing a conventional kimar, the headscarf that covers the head, neck, and chest. I think one of the reasons was that I was still getting unwanted attention from guys who thought my head wrap meant that I was a conscious black sister and therefore still available. I realized that my head wrap were not fulfilling their function as I had intended them to, but more importantly, though our increased study of the deen, Sandra and I had come to realize that the hijab was a religious obligation, an integral part of our submission, and an important act of worship. The covering of the Muslim women is referred to in the Quran in Surah Al-Nur, and tell the believing women to lower their gaze and protect their private parts and not to show off their adornment except that which is apparent, and to draw their veils all over Yubihin, their body, necks, and bosoms, and not to reveal their adornments. And in Surah Al-Ahzab, Zeb, you can find it as well in Surah in Ayat 59 as well. Aisha, wife of the Prophet, and a prominent scholar in her own right, remarked in a hadith in Sahih Bukhari that when the women of Medina, the Ansar, heard these verses, they tore the wrappers, scarves, and covered their heads and faces with them. Indeed, the hijab is mentioned in the Quran, in the hadith, and it was practiced by the earliest generations of Muslims. It is not merely a relic of Bedouin culture that has somehow infiltrated the Muslim mainstream. The hijab is Islamic. Based on these and numerous other evidence, we learned that our clothing had to fulfill certain criteria. These were: it should cover the whole body except for the face and hands. Some Islamic scholars consider it obligatory to cover the face. It should not be tight-fitting, so as to show the shape of the wearer. It should not be see-through. It should not be brightly colored. It should not be specifically men's clothing. It should not be specifically the clothing of non-Muslims. It should not be ostentatious or showy. There are also guidelines on Muslim men's clothing. These are: it should cover the area between the navel and the knee. It should not be tight-fitting in this area. It should not be see-through in this area. It should not be specifically women's clothing. It should not be specifically the clothing of non-Muslims. It should not be ostentatious or showy. It should not be silk. The lower garment should be raised above the ankle. In addition to this, men are not permitted to wear gold and are commanded to allow their beards to grow in accordance with the Sunnah, the way of the Prophet. Women, on the other hand, are not expected to keep their beards, of course. I remember that day that my friend Sandra and I decided to give those lace-trimmed hijabs a try in her room on campus. Gingerly, we held the triangle piece of cloth over our head and brought the two ends together under our chin. We then fastened them with safety pins and looked nervously at our reflection in the mirror. And do you know, it was as if, because we had so wanted to start wearing the hijab, Allah has put light in our face. We didn't look funny or dowy or plain. We looked beautiful. It was reminded of the Egyptian lady who had set the whole ball rolling, and I smiled. We both breathed a huge sigh of relief, alhamdulillah, and went to visit Hannah on the other end of campus, pleased as punch However, not everyone found this their first outing with the high with the hijab as positive as we did. Sarah told me about her first attempt to wearing the hijab. I was in central London. I felt very self-conscious. I had wrapped my scarf, Jackie O style, tightly around my face and neck, and had chosen clothes that covered my curves. And I was actually aware that no one was looking at me, though that I had a different kind of presence just with that little scarf. From a distance, I saw a girl who had known me at school and was used to my cool and trendy image. I really tried to avoid her as much as I could. I even crossed the road. I was fortunate in that I was not a lone warrior. Facing the strangeness of this new look on my own, I had sisters around me to encourage me and strengthen me, and it was not very long before I had a wide selection of hijabs made from many different kinds of fabric. I mixed and matched them with what I wore, and then they became very much a part of me. So that was a bit of chapter 5 of reading. So now let's get into a little exercise about that chapter. Let's say, what is the difference between a khimar and a hijab? There's a picture on the here, and tell me, which one do you think is a hijab and which one do you think is a khimar? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for listening. You can watch and listen to more stories in the 100 Stories Deep series if you subscribe using the link below. Thank you and goodbye.